This is it, folks. The URC final is on the cards this weekend. It is the two best sides in the URC who will go head-to-head in Dublin this weekend. The first place, Leinster lads, 16-2 in the regular season. The Bulls not too far behind with their 14-4 record. One of those two losses Leinster suffered in the regular season was against the Bulls, so it adds a little bit of something spicy to this clash, even if it was a much changed Leinster lineup for that one. But we'll go through the squads, the recent fixtures between these sides, some stats, predictions, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how this one is going to go. At the end of the day, we are going to have a new URC champion. Leinster in their first final. Bulls have been to two, never yet managed to get their hands on the trophy. I love the fact that we're going to see someone new and that it's the two best sides. Leinster have made a couple of changes to the side that beat Glasgow last week in the semi-finals. Josh van der Flier replaces Scott Penny in the number 7 jersey. Scott Penny was the top tackler for Leinster in that semi-final, so Josh will be looking to do that thing which he usually does. He's one of the top tacklers in Leinster whenever he is playing, so his return to the side is certainly a bit of good news. And likewise, Garry Ringrose is back into the midfield alongside Jordie Barrett, so Garry is in the number 13 jumper. So a couple of full-strength Irish internationals certainly is a bit of good news. Still no Furlong, still no Canan and whatnot, but having these two guys back certainly bolsters Leinster for this final. Porter, Sheehan and Clarkson, that's the front row. And those guys, more than any other position, I feel like for this final, will need to be at 100%. We've seen what the Bulls scrum can do to people, and if Leinster are off their game at scrum time, they are going to leave themselves open to some Bulls attack. Yeah, the Bulls have got a really good scrum. So Clarkson and Porter, I don't think Porter conceded any penalties last week. He's up against Wilco Lowe. He's going to need to have a game. Dan Sheehan was all around the park last week against the Glasgow Warriors. 17 carries from him. Very, very busy guy. Certainly an important guy whenever he starts for Leinster. McCarthy and Ryan, that's a pretty bulky second row, so that'll certainly help them at scrum time. And then, as I mentioned, van der Flier back in at 7. Baird, who's in at number 6, same as last week. 13 tackles from him last week. Not necessarily what you think when you think Ryan Baird, because he's got so many of those highlight reel moments where he's bloody spinning out of tackles and offloading and whatnot. But, you know, hard tackling shift from him last week. And then Jack Conan captains the side at number 8. Gibson-Park and Prendergast, the 9-10 combo. Gibson-Park, his box kicking last week against Glasgow certainly put the Glasgow backfield under a bit of pressure. We also saw the Bulls drop a bit of ball last week too against the Sharks, so that might be an area that the Leinster guys look to target. Prendergast always gets under the spotlight, particularly his missed tackle count. Missed goal kicks last week as well. You feel like in a final you can't be leaving 11 points or whatever it was that Leinster left out there last week, so he'll be no doubt working on that throughout the week. Doing it under pressure in a final is certainly something else though, but he's done it at the international stage, so he needs to do it this week. The missed tackle count, it was 4 last week. He'll be looking to keep those numbers low, but you can bet the Bulls will be sending some runners down his channel. Jordie, Barrett and Ringrose, like I mentioned in the midfield, that is a pretty classy looking midfield. Jordie's last game for Leinster before you guys have to send him back down this way, so we'll be looking forward to seeing him in black soon. But yeah, he'll be looking to go out a winner with Leinster in this last game. James Lowe, Tommy O'Brien and Jimmy O'Brien, that is the back three. Yeah, they didn't use as much of James Lowe's boot last week, but they still have that in the arsenal. Tommy O'Brien's been having a pretty cracking season, ball in hand, very attacking-minded, you know, likes busting a tackle winger. And then, like, Jimmy O'Brien, I think, was the most effective ball carrier in terms of the backs last week for Leinster, 14 carries, 4 defenders beaten. Yeah, he's got a job to do ahead of him as well. Kelleher, Boyle, Slimani, Snyman, Deegan, McGrath, Byrne and Osborne. That is your bench. So Jamie Osborne drops to the bench, having started last week. And yeah, a couple of changes in the starting 15, but largely a pretty stable Leinster 23. For the Bulls, also pretty stable. Unfortunately, no Cameron Honeycomb. That is a bit of devastating news because you want your big ball-carrying players in your finals. So whilst like Leinster are able to recall the likes of a Josh van der Flier, the Bulls are without Honeycomb for the final. So that yes, that's not good news because that guy is certainly that kind of X-factor player that you feel like could have a key moment in the final. So they've had to shift Marcel Coetzee to number 8, but he was very busy around the park for the Bulls last week. Someone commented when I did the match review for that one, like, what did that guy ever do to Rassie Erasmus? Because he's never really been shown the love in that regard. But South Africa's got a lot of good loose forwards. Marcel Coetzee is certainly one of them. 10 carries from him last week, very busy. Nortje and Van Staden round out the back row for them. Nortje made like 17 tackles last week in the back row. Van Staden's up from the bench, so it's a start from him, and you know that guy's going to get through the tackle count as well. The front row, though, Wessels, Rabah, and Lowe. Honestly, I feel like if the Bulls are going to win this game in Dublin, it's going to start there. I mentioned it with Leinster, they'll need to be on form. When the Bulls scrum gets on top of you, sometimes there's not much you can do about it. So if Wilco Lowe can get the edge over Porter, or Wessels can give young Clarkson problems, that leaves the door open for the Bulls to cause some havoc. And it's not just the Bulls front row. I mean, they got some good attacking-minded players throughout their team. You don't get to be the second team in the URC on the log unless you've got attacking threats all over the park. But the front row, that is going to be the battle to watch, I feel like, in this one. Visa and Van Heerden are in the second row. Visa, I think, had 19 tackles last week, so also kind of one of those kind of high work rate guys. That's where a lot of the work was coming from, the engine room of that Bulls pack. Backs-wise, Papier and Hussein, 19 combo. Papier was having a game last week with those offloads and wee sniping runs. His battle up against Gibson-Park is going to be a slightly different one, with Gibson-Park looking to maybe opt a bit more for boot than to snipe, but yeah, you love seeing two different style guys go head-to-head. Forster and Creel. Forster had 16 tackles last week as well. Very busy guy, but they'll need to watch their P's and Q's in terms of their discipline. And then the back three, Moodie, de Klerk, and Roux. They dropped a bit of ball last week, like I mentioned, but they also kick a lot from Roux. So it's going to be an interesting tactical battle. If Gibson-Park keeps kicking the ball to Roux and then Roux tries to return it with interest, as long as he doesn't drop the thing. For me, that's one to watch as well. De Klerk, like 8 defenders beaten last week. He is certainly, coming into good form. Nice cross kick to Moodie for his, try assist as well. So they got attacking threats all over the park, the Bulls. But like I said, the main thing I'm looking forward to is the scrum battle, which is a strange one going into a final. You're not necessarily looking forward to the scrum, but I feel like it is where the game potentially could be won and lost. Vandenberg, Chakwini, Smith, Kirsten, Carr comes into the side. Berger, Johannes, and Williams. That is the replacements for the Bulls. So no temptation for either side to go with the extra forward. They've both got 3 backs on the bench, which is just an interesting shift from international rugby, where it seems to be like 6-2 is becoming more and more common. Line-out-wise, if we're looking at other set pieces apart from the scrum, the Bulls have a slightly better line-out than the Leinster lad throughout the season. 87% to Leinster's 84%, but that is kind of much of a muchness. But in a final set piece is going to be key. Leinster tend to dominate the possession. They tend to dominate the territory. They are going to grind teams into the dust. It's similar to what we've been seeing Ireland do for a long time. It's no coincidence that Leinster has so many Irish internationals in their squad. But the Bulls, despite kind of less ball, less total number of carries, tend to do a bit more with less. It doesn't take the Bulls as many carries to generate the run meters and clean breaks and defenders beaten and all that kind of stuff. So if you look at the average meters per carry count, the Bulls are over 4, which is like the gold standard, whereas the Leinster guys are down in the 3s, like 3.2, but they play a unique kind of brand of rugby where it's more about quick recycle ball than necessarily getting individual guys 4 meters forwards every single time, if you know what I mean. But yeah, they did play in the regular season, like I mentioned. It was a Bulls victory in that one, 21-20. I think only 3 of the Leinster guys that are playing in this final started in that game. That was Jimmy O'Brien, Tommy O'Brien, and Jordie Barrett, whereas the Bulls had about, I think, 7 of the same starters. Just looking at starting 15, there are some guys who were on the bench for those ones that are now starting and vice versa, but yeah, slightly different lineups for this final. That being said, in knockout rugby in the URC, Bulls have got a pretty good record against Leinster, man. Last year, semi-final down in Pretoria, 25-20, and then 2022 at the RDS, Bulls away from home, 27-26. both campaigns which led to losses in the final for the Bulls. Predictions-wise, are the Bulls given much of a shot? Interestingly, 12-point underdogs with the bookies. Leinster predicted to win this one by 12, so more than a try to the good. The Rugby Forecast algorithm is a little bit more conservative, saying Leinster by 9. So either way, according to the predictions, this is the year where Leinster lives up to the pre-season billing and walks away URC champions for the first time. Will they get it done, or can the Bulls throw a spanner in the works? It's on at Croke Park. Hopefully we get a cracking crowd for that one. It's a kind of early evening kickoff at 5 o'clock, which is 4 in the morning for me, which is not terrible. It's doable. I'll certainly be watching it live. Andrea Piatti is the ref. He's had a few moments this year, but fingers crossed we're not talking too much about him at the end of the game. You guys let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I would much appreciate it. You guys take care. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.